Labour Party politicians, past and present, speaking about home education. Home education first hit the political headlines on the 19th of January, 2009. This is when it was announced that Ed Balls, the Secretary of State for Children, Schools, and Families had asked Badman to carry out a review to investigate whether local authorities and other public agencies are able to effectively discharge their duties and responsibilities for safeguarding and ensuring a suitable education for all children. Whether home educating parents are receiving the support and advice they want to ensure they provide a good, balanced education for their children. And to consider what evidence there is to support claims that home education could be used as a cover for child abuse such as neglect, forced marriage, sexual exploitation, or domestic servitude. In June that year, Balls accepted Badman's recommendations, and after consultation the measures were included in the Children's Schools and Families Bill, 2009.
And will introduce a new registration system for home educators. A number of honourable gentlemen raised and members raised the issue of home education, the member for Yeovil and Beverley and Holderness. I would just want to agree with him in saying that home education is a well-established and important part of our education system. He asked me to, I think he asked, would we recognise the people who give lots of their time and effort to raising standards in home education. One of my constituents came to see me recently, Caroline Chevalin, who makes the very same point, and I'm happy to endorse that. But I think it's very important that there is certainty that there are good processes and good standards in place. Registration and monitoring will not be onerous where home educators are doing a good job, but they will give local authorities the tools they need to tackle the small number of cases where the education provided is not good enough. So I hope we can get the balance right here, and I'm sure my right honourable friend is working to ensure that is indeed the case. To turn to home education, I know that this will be an issue which is debated in detail in the committee. The vast majority of home educating parents provide, in my view, Mr Speaker, a good education for their children, and I am fully committed to the principle that parents who choose to should be able to home educate. It's parents who are in charge of making the ultimate decision as to how their children are educated rather than the state. And we think there's around 70,000 children who are being home educated, often for a variety of different reasons, and often to a very high standard by very committed parents indeed. Our responsibility is to ensure not just that the large majority of children who are being home educated, but that all children who are being home educated are safe and are learning properly. And it was because of concerns that I asked Mr Badman to do his review, which reported in the summer. This bill, following consultation, makes some changes to his recommendation, but accepts the general core principles of his review. Firstly, that as a matter of principle, parents should be allowed to home educate. Secondly, that they need more support, financially and otherwise, in order to be able to do so, whether that's catch-up one-to-one tuition for children who need it, or whether that's the cost of exam fees. But that it's also important to make sure that we do know that all children are safe and are being properly educated. That is why, that is why the bill introduces a new registration scheme for home educators, with a duty on local authorities to identify all home educated children and to ensure they are receiving a suitable education. I think this is vital to make sure that all home educated children are safe and making progress. I think it's wrong to see this as an attack on home education, and those people who try to represent this as an attack on home education in principle, I think are wrong. And on that basis, I have to say that I agreed with the vast majority of the recommendations and the sentiments set out in the Select Committee report on home education. On that basis. And let me quote the Select Committee. In our view, it is unacceptable that local authorities do not know accurately how many children of school age in their area are in school, are being home educated, or are otherwise not in school. I completely agree with that, Mr Deputy Speaker, but it is not possible for local authorities to know that information unless they know where all the children are and whether they are being home educated. I also agree with the Select Committee. We believe that registration would encourage local authorities and home educators to recognise that it is to their mutual advantage to have a clear record of children who are being educated. And the Select Committee also says the wider evidence we have received illustrated the potential value of the requirement for annual meetings between home educating families and local authority officers for the purposes of supporting home education provision. We believe that local authorities need a guaranteed means of engaging with these families. And I have to say, Mr Deputy Speaker, it is vital that, that people in local authorities are properly trained. The bill makes it clear there is no right for a local authority to see the child of a home-educated family on their own without the parents there. There is no right to that in the bill.
Mr Speaker, a number of honourable members from across the House raised the issue of home education, which is an important topic. It is something where we all want to strike that right balance between allowing parents their proper right to exercise their responsibility with respect to their own children and educate at home should they choose to do so. It is also right for us to balance that against the need to ensure that we have the education standards that we want, including for teachers who are children who are educated at home, and as a consideration to that, also issues with respect to safeguarding. In dealing with some of the issues that were raised by a number of people, including the members from the Isle of Wight, City of London, Beverley and Holderness, Romsey, Merioneth and Nant Conway, Huddersfield and Vauxhall, the fundamental right is that of the child not to be denied a suitable education. The local authority must consider the wishes and feelings of the child when carrying out monitoring. In most cases, parents provide a good education, but where this is not the case, then the state should intervene. Monitoring of home education will be light touch and proportionate, so parents doing a good job will not see much difference to the current arrangements. The bill focuses on education, not on safeguarding, and safeguarding issues will be dealt with in the usual way. It is inconceivable that a local authority would revoke registration for a genuine mistake. The legislation says that registration may be revoked, and in these cases parents can appeal to an independent panel if the local authority behaved unreasonably. There is no right to see a child on their own, but it is a factor that can be taken into account if the authority decides to seek a school attendance order. And there is no right of entry under these provisions. And I hope that's answered some of the general points that people have been making.
Labour Party silent on home education for almost 15 years. After Gordon Brown lost the 2010 general election, Labour has not mentioned home education in any of its policy statements until very recently. Prior to that election, both Conservative and Liberal Democrats, MPs had opposed the Badman proposals and the clauses relating to home education in the CSF bill. In contrast to Labour's silence, both these parties have subsequently adopted policies which echo those which they had ensured were deleted from the bill, and in the case of the Lib Dems, go much further. Labour finally broke its silence on home education in December last year.
My Lords, during the passage of the Schools Bill, which didn't complete its journey through the legislative process, one area that should have made it into law was the provision of a homeschool register, a long overdue addition to safeguarding measures. During the passage of the bill, I spoke about the increasing number of children receiving an education outside of the classroom and how they could be missing out on benefits that a school environment brings. Vital safeguards in helping to make sure children aren't being taught in unsuitable or dangerous environments. It was quite disturbing, therefore, on Tuesday to hear from a permanent secretary in the Department for Education that the DFE was blocked by Downing Street from legislating for a register of children not in school. My Lords, I can clearly state the next Labour government will legislate to identify children out of school and ensure families and schools get the support needed to guarantee an excellent education for every child and to seek to safeguard those children and young people.
Bridget Phillipson.
Mr Speaker, if it's the Secretary of State's number one priority, then why isn't she legislating for a register of children not in school, a measure that has wide support right across this House? It was missing from the King's speech, missing despite the Secretary of State's repeated promises to legislate, despite it having been in their abandoned schools bill, and despite, according to the Permanent Secretary at the Department, being in her department's submission. So can the Secretary of State confirm, as the Permanent Secretary suggested, that it was blocked by number 10? No law to register and count the children being taught at home, which Labour would back now and pass in government. And partnership works when information is known and information is shared. We will bring in the register of homeschool children that the Education Secretary couldn't persuade the Prime Minister was important. If children aren't in schools, local authorities need to be clear about where they are. Again, it's about responsibility. It only works where there is visibility. Children who are homeschooled deserve the same chances, the same opportunities, the same success, the same standards as children in schools.
Thank you for that, and I was delighted to hear what you propose to do about regulating or having a register of home education, which I think is very necessary. But I think it's only really a start. There are 100,000 or more pupils in the country who are apparently being educated at home. I'd be personally surprised if more than 20,000 of them had parents really competent to do so. It's essentially an unregulated area. Local authorities have very small powers of inspection unless they're concerned about a serious safeguarding issue. I hear what you say about the relationship between schools and government and parents, but given this is such a difficult area, is this something you would please, when you bring forward legislation on a register, also look at tightening up the inspection and regulation regime?
I think what I'd say first of all is that it is the right of parents to elect to home educate their children. Many do that incredibly well and take it incredibly seriously. But as you say, it's too easy for children to fall between the cracks because of that lack of oversight that we have. I think this is an important first step. I think if we can get to the position where councils know where children are, it will then become easier to move, as you've described, to looking at what other interventions might be necessary. I'd be keen to look at the evidence around that and be led by that. I think it's incredibly important that we do it in that way.
Bridget Phillipson to move, Shadow Secretary of State.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I beg to move the motion in my name and in the name of the Leader of the Opposition, and I draw the House's attention to my interests in the register. Today, Madam Deputy Speaker, we seek permission of this House to make time in the weeks ahead to pass legislation to protect the interests of children who are not in school, to use a day of parliamentary time to put their concerns first, to put them at the heart of our work, to make real for one day the promise that only a Labour government can bring, the promise of a Britain where children come first. Because it is a national scandal that every day, every week, so many children are not in school. Absence from school is not simply a problem in itself. It is a symptom of deeper problems and a cause of further problems. And while the package of measures that should tackle those problems, which under a Labour government will tackle those problems, must be detailed and comprehensive, a key part of it is knowing where children who are not in school are instead. And of course, before I go further, I should emphasise that some parents choose lawfully and properly to educate their children at home. Many of them do so very well, very effectively, and to a very high standard. Those children are not the focus of our concern today. Their parents do not have anything to fear from a register of children not in school. The register of the sort that I and the Leader of the Opposition seek the permission of this House to consider in a bill next month. And I want to emphasise that until very recently, support for the register of children not in school was a cross-party endeavour, one in which politicians across this House agreed. It was, of course, an element of the schools bill, which the government introduced in the other place in the summer of 2022. The Register of Children Not in School was one element of that bill, which received wide support, not least among professionals in children's services. And the legislation we will bring next month, with this House's permission, if today's motion is agreed, will be simple. It will be part 3 of the government's own schools bill from 2022, which provides for a register of children not in school. Nothing that members opposite would not have been prepared to vote for had it been tabled by their own ministers. So there can be no reason, no excuse for Conservative members who care about this issue not to support the motion today and the bill next month. They can choose their party or our children. I commend this motion to the House.
But alongside that, I think we need to have a clearer sight of where children are. So a register of children not in school, something the government had promised to legislate on but haven't acted.